So 2016, I lost my brother, my middle brother, to a heroin overdose. That was November 11th of 2016. So just 8 years ago.
So I hear that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And that was kind of the catalyst to starting something. I had a business technically under a different name. I had made a name and made a logo, and like that was like it, right? It really wasn't anything, and I really started to get into it a little bit more, and trying a little bit more after that happened, and really that was kind of like an eye-opening experience for me in many ways, obviously. But it's funny because ironic funny that you had mentioned way earlier when we started talking, loving to do what I do, right? And I'll be honest with you, when I first started working with the Army, those that know Army will get this, and those that won't, I'm going to try and fill in pieces for you.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads, where being mediocre is a choice. Oh my gosh, where you have to refuse to be me. I messed up my intro. You know what it was? I practiced this like 50,000 times every time because I want to get it right, perfect on the dot. And it never fails. So when I'm practicing, I got it. When I try to do it in real life, it just like comes out like hoopla. It's just, what did I just say? Where being mediocre is a choice and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. I'm your host, Quan. I go by Q. And I am joined by a very special guest, in-person guest, right? Like, I know you guys are used to seeing James on here, but, it's an extraordinary experience that I met Michael Sherman, and it was at a military class, where we were just teaching resilience. And when he started talking, in my head, I'm never usually thinking about like, hey, who can I have on my podcast? But when you started talking, and after like the first time, I was like, I don't know if he's like an a-hole or anything, but I was like, he seems like a cool dude. And after the second time, I was like, no, for sure. So like I started scheming in my head. I was like, how am I going to ask him if he wants to be in my podcast?
Yeah.
And I think at one point when you saw, you're like, oh, you have one of those? And I was reading about my podcast. I was like, yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. It's like, there's my way in. I can ask him now. And so ended up asking him. He said yes. It was awesome. So I'm super excited to have him on. But before we get too deep into the actual podcast, can you kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself? I know a little bit about you, and just lieu of the class and us talking, but can you kind of tell the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are?
So I'm not an asshole.
Well, no, you're not. You're not. Well, if you were, it'd be a good one.
Yeah.
Like a good a-hole, like one that people are like, I like him.
Yeah. No, I'm really straightforward. I think that's it. There's a lot of people, like even with what I do, with the Army, there's a lot of people on our contract, and I'll travel a lot, and I'll meet people for the first time, and I will actually get that. They'll be like, man, I heard from so-and-so, you're an asshole. I'm like, actually, you're a really good dude. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I'm blunt and straight to the point, and people don't like that for some reason. So
no, they like you to go around and be like, oh, tell me more about you. You're like, hey man, that looks stupid.
Yes.
Well, I think what it was is like, when you meet people like such yourself, who's very blunt, very straightforward, they're used to, like military guys, because that's most of us. That's what we're like, right? So when you were like, nah, I hate being served, I'm like, you would fit right in. Yeah. You would fit right in. Yep. Like, you'd be like, hey, that's pretty dumb, and I don't know why you did that, but did you think about it? Probably not. But go ahead, tell me what your thoughts are. Like, you would fit right in. And I was like, he didn't serve, but I'm telling you right now, like, I would kill for him to be on my team, because he would just make people be like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So no, yeah. So never served. I've been working for the Army as a contractor for the last almost a decade. Yeah. My background is in sports psychology. So the Army hires us to take soldiers. These days they refer to you guys as tactical athletes. I don't know if you know that or not, but when the time comes, you need to put a bullet on your resume. Make sure that goes on the resume.
There we go.
But yeah, just because of the areas that you guys operate in throughout the country here, but then also abroad as well. some of those environments, it really requires both mental and physical side of just like being an athlete. So they bring us in to take what we know about getting athletes, coaches, and teams to perform at their best under any circumstances, and just apply those same skills and techniques to soldiers. So probably about 85% of what we do is more so on that sports psychology side. You saw like the 10%, which is the resilience piece, which is also equally important, which we can talk about. And then something I come to specialize in, just being down here at Fort Sam Houston, is leadership. So the first place that I was at when I came to Fort Sam Houston was I got embedded at the Non-Commissioned Officer Academy. So both nice. ALC, Advanced Leader course, and SLC, Senior Leader course. So that was me getting indoctrinated, basically, literally and figuratively. So they brought us in to take the civilian aspect of leadership, because as I'm sure unfortunately in the Army over the last 10-ish years, maybe even going back further, there's become a big lack of trust. And so how do we cultivate trust just within people? Because as the Army says, mission first, people always.
Gosh. But it's just a saying. I don't think it means anything, but it's just a saying.
Yeah, I'll throw that in there. But there has been a big push to let's get some leaders, some additional training to be able to actually galvanize people and take care of people, and also the mission. So that's been good. So I've come to specialize in that as well. So yeah,
that's awesome. So did you always? And I know the answer, but did you always want to do this? Like, were you always thinking like, man, this is where I see myself? Because I mean, doing this for a decade, that's a long time. So there's obviously a commitment to that, to say like, I enjoy what I do.
Yeah.
At least I hope you do. But so like, did you always want to do it, or was it just a thing that you did, and then you were like, this is where I'm supposed to be?
No. So it's not always what I wanted to do. So when I first went to college, I was an education major. So 3.5 years. Had about 6 months left, a few credit hours left, and I would have been a high school social studies teacher. I stepped foot into a high school classroom to do my student teaching, and I said, this is not for me. For a myriad of reasons. A lot of it was that schools, and I hate being this guy because I tell people don't be that guy, but schools weren't run the way that schools were run when I was in school.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was like the No Child Left Behind stuff that came into effect. Where you had kids that would fail tests, and they'd come in at 6 o'clock the next morning and retake the test.
Yeah.
And it was just something morally, ethically, or how I was raised, or a combination of all that I was like, hey, that's not really what I envisioned myself being a part of.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I did one of those, like a literal and figurative hard looks in the mirror. And I said, okay, what if you're going to switch with only a few credit hours left, you're going to add years on to school and add tons of student loans on, like, what do you love doing? And the answer at that point was, I love caddying. So at 12 years old, I started caddying as a summer job. And that's what I loved doing. I did it for 16 years, all the way till I was 28 years old, getting up at 5 a.m. every day during the summer. I loved doing it. I loved the psychological aspect of it. I liked being out there and just bullshitting with guys and telling stories and dirty jokes and stuff like that. And so when I sat there and had that good hard look in the mirror, I was like, look, you could be a caddy for a little bit longer, but that's not really like a career. Like, it's hard to make a career of it.
Yeah.
Because eventually, no matter how you can get on the PGA Tour, cool, but eventually your body breaks down, right? You can only do it for so long. So then it was more of a introspective look of like, okay, what do I like about the caddying? And that was the psychological aspect. So I was like, okay, so go online. I knew obviously a little bit about psychology, but then I stumbled upon sports psychology, and I was like, that's it. Because I'd been a part of sports for my whole life. And I was like, yeah, I can make a career out of that. And it's something that I like. It's the aspect of caddying that I really like. So yeah, changed my major to psychology. So I got my undergraduate degree in general psychology, and then went to Miami University and got my master's degree in sport and performance psychology.
Okay, so with sports psychology, is it literally the essence of like understanding athletes and what they think in like hard, difficult situations, I guess? Like if they're like in the heat of the moment, like I guess in the Michael Jordan like moment,
Yeah.
right? Is that it's like, hey, how does a person get to that? Is that what that is? What sports? If you had to sum it all up.
Yeah, I mean, it could be in the moment, it could be pregame, it could be postgame. A lot of times, one of the big things we work with athletes about is like nerves.
Yeah.
Like when you have a big game coming up or a big event, or depending on what the sport is, nerves.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know whether you're talking about professional athletes, whether you're talking about college athletes, whether you're talking about kids, you go into slumps.
Yeah.
And where it's like, hey, I'm doing everything I should be doing, and the results just aren't there, and that starts to get in your head. Literally and figuratively get in your head. So how do we then work with you to get you out of those said slumps? Like there's actually a hockey player that I've been working with. We just had a call last week, and he hasn't scored all season. They're like 15 games into the season, hasn't scored, and it's starting to get into his head. So he sent me a text, hey, can we meet? And I said, heck yeah. So we had a good, probably about hour and a half conversation of what are we doing before the game? What are we doing during the game? And then also like, how do we then look at our performance during the game.
Yeah.
In like the aftermath of it. So if you don't score, what else did you do during the game that actually led you to be in the right positions to score, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times, a lot of people just focus on that outcome of, hey, I didn't score, but you're forgetting about all the little things that you did really well.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not going to speak nerd hockey because I'm sure not a lot of people understand the game, but it's just going through some of those things. It's getting people to see like, oh, I'm actually doing some really good stuff. Yeah, I just need to make some tweaks here, and then the results will come. But trying to get them to be more process focused and less outcome focused. Working with coaches again on how to lead people. It's a big thing, especially nowadays. There's a college football team that I work with the whole transfer portal, and all of that NIL and transfer portal stuff has totally changed everything.
Yeah.
To where now, this is a mid-major school that I'm talking about, the team that I work with, and they're used to having kids for 3 or 4 years because it's a mid-major, right? And now they get them for a year because if they're not playing there, they're going to go try and play somewhere else. And then you got transfers coming in. And so they brought me in earlier this year during spring ball to just help galvanize a team, because you've got half of your locker rooms brand new faces on a college football team now every single year. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Again, pre, post, during, what's going through your head during, what should be, what shouldn't be. Big part of it, when you get athletes that get injured, how do you learn to trust your body again after an injury?
Oh, that's very hard.
Yeah.
I don't sprint anymore because I hurt myself. Like I'll sprint, but like it's never going to be like it's never going to be 100% sprint. I'll never do that again. It was my hamstring, and literally I've hurt myself. Like I rolled my ankle, I hurt myself, but I've never like injured myself being actively engaged in like sports or physical activity. Like that's a whole new experience for me. And so I'm sprinting, and I'm a big dude, but I've always been able to move, and the hamstring muscle, it just went from down here all the way up, and then it shot back down like a rubber band. And I'm running, and like I feel it, and so I look down and I see the whole muscle do the whole thing, go the up and down motion, and then I'm like, I saw that happen, and it didn't feel good, and I was like, and I kind of just like on the track, like at Fort Sam, like it's happened here. I'm just like running on the track sprinting. I'm like, I go on the ground, and then my first arm was like, I'll get up. He's all right.
Rub some dirt up.
Yeah. Well, because I was racing him, and he thought like I was just like faking an injury, and I was like, I can't get up. And so now, like, after the injury, I was like, sprinting? No, I'm good. People are like, hey, we're doing sprints. I'll do a fast jog. I'll run at like a faster pace, but I'm not actually sprinting. I won't do that. Like that's nope. I'm never doing. I don't want to hurt myself like that again. So I get that piece.
At least you don't sprint because you got injured. I don't sprint because I don't sprint. That's the whole hockey part. Like I'm good on skates. You get me outside of skates, I struggle.
Oh, so okay. So like you're from Ohio, right? Okay.
Cleveland, yeah, east side of Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, and so like hockey's a big thing over there.
Yeah, anywhere like I hate how we consider Ohio the Midwest.
I do too, but yes,
it's not. The Midwest is Nebraska and Iowa.
Yeah.
To me, we should create a whole new region called the Great Lakes region, and that's where you've got your Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio. But yeah, Midwest. But as soon as you start getting up into that Midwest, northeast, it becomes a really big sport.
Gotcha. And so I mean, because I know Canada's like essentially right there, so I imagine a lot. Did you spend time in Canada playing hockey and like just?
Yep.
Man, I wanted to play hockey, so I'll be very okay. And I know a black man playing hockey. Okay, so I know I know they exist. I know they play professionally, but I'm from a desert, so I was born in Vegas.
Okay.
Did some years in Vegas. We moved to Dallas for a year, and then we moved to Arizona. But I claim Arizona, right? So I've been to deserts. So like me sitting here saying, growing up in the desert, also being a black man. Look, I'm like, hey, yeah, I want to play hockey, and they're like, my parents. I remember they're like, I mean, yeah, sure, we can look into that, if you want. I'm like, so where do I learn to ice skate?
Right.
And they're like, I don't know. We live in a desert. So like, I have no idea. I never got off the ground. And then I watched a hockey game, and it was at the time, the Coyotes. They unfortunately have moved to Utah. But I mean, I heard they're doing really good in Utah. I mean, I guess the team is still the team and they're doing really well, but still that, their colors and everything, which are pretty cool colors in Utah. I digress with that. But I never got hockey off the ground because I watched the game and I was like, those dudes are punching each other and no one's stopping them. I'm good. Like don't get me wrong, it feel really good to punch somebody like in the first time. You're like, man, this is really cool. But then afterwards, you're like, I gotta get punched back. I'm good. I don't know if it's really worth it. Like it's for my teammates, sure, but like just like, hey, I'm mad. No, I'm good. And I'm on ice. And on ice skates. Nah, dude, that's heck no.
Yeah, it's I think it's the only sport, at least that I know of, that has bare knuckle fighting.
I mean,
when you sit there and think about it, like the UFC, they're wearing padded gloves.
Yeah, I mean they do have bare knuckle, actually like UFC style like fist fighting, but like those are crazy. Like I watched some of those fights and I'm like, dude, doesn't your hand hurt? Like,
yeah,
like also like I would feel bad punching someone that hard. Like
the fighting in hockey though, it's a little different. And also it's not very prevalent anymore. You'll still see it, but it's not like the old days. And even like old days, I mean 20 years ago, hockey was always a self-policing game, right? Meaning that if somebody took a cheap shot at your star player, you had a goon or an enforcer that would go out and take care of it. And now that's not going to happen again. So there was always, I don't want to say always, 98% of the time, there was a point to the fights where a casual hockey fan's not going to see that. There's going to be, oh, look at those barbarians out there just punching each other. No, there was a reason to it. And a lot of the times, like even if you watch or you go watch videos or you watch a hockey game to this day, when they're done fighting, they'll get up and give each other a pat on the ass. Or as they're skating over to the penalty box, they'll be smiling at each other, like, hey, that was a good one, because they know what role they're playing for the team. So it's very interesting, like when you actually get to know and understand the game a little bit, that it's not what it appears to be on the
So it's not malicious. It's just like, hey,
usually not.
I got you.
Again, there's always those occasional, right? But the vast majority of them, it's being done for a reason. So yeah.
Gotcha. And did your dad, did your parents really push you get into hockey, or was it you were just like, hey, I'm playing hockey because I've seen it and I love it?
Yeah, no, it was me. It was all me.
Really?
Yeah, my dad was a wrestler. My dad was actually sponsored by Adidas shoes and was a cross country runner and ran. Used to race bikes like Lance Armstrong bikes.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's called.
Those expensive.
I don't know.
Bicyclists.
Oh yeah. He had a
very
bike.
expensive.
He had a bike when we were growing up that we weren't allowed to touch, and it was like off limits. Do not touch this bike.
I'll chop off your hands.
Yes, pretty much.
Gotcha.
And we also believe he would. So yeah, my dad was like that old school, like disciplinarian, like he was a hard guy. But no, I started watching. Well, I remember coming home from school, and there used to be this roller hockey league, a professional roller hockey league called RHI, Roller Hockey International. And it would be on ESPN2 back when they used to call it the Deuce, way back in the day. And it was on after school, and I just started watching it, and then we started playing roller hockey. I actually taught my dad how to skate. My mom got him some roller blades for his birthday one year, and we took him out when I was like 5, 6 years old and taught him how to skate. Then he got into it. But yeah, it became a family thing. I have 2 younger brothers. We all played. My dad played or started playing eventually. So yeah, it became a big thing. I still, to this day, referee college hockey. So yeah.
You referee college hockey?
Referee college hockey.
I forgot you said that.
Yeah.
Man, Do you enjoy that? Is it just more like you get to be on the ice and like, you may not be playing, but it's
That's a great question. Q. Let's see how far into this I want to get. I used to love it. We'll put it that way. I started refereeing just to stay involved in the game because to me, like after your playing career's over, you have two choices. You either, well, technically three. You either become a coach, become a referee, or you just get out of the game totally, right? And I knew I didn't want to get out of the game totally. It was a game I loved since I was 3 years old, so I wanted to stay involved in it. And at the time I was in grad school, so I needed money. And when you coach a youth league team, that don't pay you anything. That's volunteer.
Yeah.
Reffing pays you, right? So I started reffing to make some money during grad school, and recognized that I was halfway decent at it, or at least I think so. There's a lot of fans and coaches that would tell you otherwise, but so I developed a passion for it. And then when I moved down here, I started doing the college stuff, and now I do all the scheduling and all the evaluating and all that stuff for it as well. But however, it's starting to dwindle. I'm not gonna lie. I still love getting out there. I still love interacting with the players, especially at the college level, because usually there's a mutual respect there. So even though you're swearing at each other and stuff during play, at the end of the game, you shake hands and, hey, great game. We'll see you next week, or we'll see you when you guys come back to Texas A&M or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just over these last couple of years that respect is slowly started to fade amongst coaches, amongst players, and especially fans, that it's just, I've questioned, do I still want to do this? And it's unfortunately college, you can't control some of that stuff, but it's starting to seep into the youth hockey. And it's getting bad. I can deal with it. I own a company called Mentally Tougher. Like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Right. It's more so just seeing the game that I love turn into what it's turned into, with the way parents get. Right now you'll go out and do a kids game, and you've got a 12-year-old kid telling you that you fucking suck, you're fucking blind, and I'm like, what?
Where are your parents?
Well, but the problem is, right? So yeah, I'll give you an example, right? So there was a tournament in Austin 3 weeks ago, and we didn't get the schedule until like 6 days prior.
Nice.
Yeah. Right. So, and there's 65 games at 3 different rinks, right? So, it's like you're moving chess pieces around to get these games covered, right? And so there was a 14U game, and I had to there's a 15-year-old referee, just started out. It's like his first or second year reffing, but I had to put him on I needed a body to put out there. Should he have been doing the game? No. Right. It's above his head, but I needed somebody. So I put him out there, and at this rink, there's 2 sheets of ice. So he was on one side, I was on the other side. I come into the locker room after the game, and this 15-year-old kid referee is sitting in there with his head in his hands, basically almost crying.
Damn.
And I'm like, dude, what's up? And he's like, the parents that were up top are saying that I fucking suck and I don't fucking belong out here, and I'm in way over my fucking head. I'm like, I'm sitting there, like, I'm thinking, like, number one, I felt bad for the kid, and I was like, hey, get your head up, and we went over some stuff, and it was fine. But like, on the way home, I got a 2-hour drive home, and I'm like, where have we gotten to in society that you've got grown adults yelling that at a 15-year-old kid who's giving up his weekend to go out there and referee your kid's hockey game?
Well, I will say, one, I don't think they don't. Problem is, they don't see the 15-year-old kid. They see the ref uniform on the 15-year-old kid, but it's more of, it's the referee who has it out against my kid, not that 15-year-old who is, he gave us weekend, like, hey man, keep it up. Really happy to see you're out here, and making some money, doing something good for yourself, rather than, God forbid, out here doing something that you shouldn't be. But yes, it's an amazing question, right? Where have we gone we've got to the point in society where it's like adults have no problem cussing out kids or like fighting kids. Like, social media is dangerous, and I know everybody knows this, but like, I don't know how many times I've seen I watch a video, and it's like these grown adults being like, hey, I'm gonna beat your kid up. First and foremost, you're not gonna put your hands on my kid. Right. Like, you're not, right? Like, I don't care if my kid, did or said something he shouldn't have. Like, that's my job, my responsibility to punish him. You come tell me, and look, I'll embarrass my kid in front of him. I'll embarrass my kid to let you know, like, hey, we don't tolerate that. Right. But the first thing out of your mouth when you come up to me and say, I'm going to beat up your kid, is going to be like, well, all right, man, hold on. I got like 5 guns in this house. I don't know if you know this or not, but like, that's a dangerous thing to say, to come onto someone's property and say, I'm going to beat your kid up. Like, I wouldn't do that. I don't encourage that. And you don't know who you're talking to. Like, you don't know, like, there's some crazy people out there.
Yeah.
I say all I say, like, where it gets to the point where they're getting a yelling match, but then these kids feel entitled where they can just join in, and it's like, and the parents don't stop them. And I'm like, hold on. All right. 2 adults are talking, kid joins in, adults stop and say, hey, know your place. I'm taking care of it. Now you just ruined it. Get inside. I apologize. You have a good day, sir. I'll take care of it. Right. But society now, we're like, no, like, anybody can get it. Anybody, like, hey, if I feel like you've disrespected me, if I feel like you've slighted me in any way, age does not matter. Age, gender, you can get it. You can get yelled at. You can get, people road rage, punching people's windows. Like, crazy. Texas is crazier because people will shoot each other. And I don't know how people are so willing to get into gunfights. I don't like gunfights. But anyway, people are willing to get into it over, like, yeah, you cut me off. Like, I get upset, but like, it's Texas, it's the 35. We're all trying to get somewhere. So I get it. But it's just the respect of, like, respect your elders, and respect of, like, for, like, the younger generation is gone. And so now you have younger generations who don't respect the older generations, but the older generations are in this point of stature where they're like, they expected, like, you should respect me because I'm an adult.
Sure.
But then it's like, you don't respect them. Like, you don't give them any respect because they're kids, but you want the respect that you're not willing to give. So it doesn't make any sense. But I don't know. Society is crumbling, if you will, because of, I think morality is one of the biggest things, and we don't have to get too deep into it, but morality and ethics have gone almost depleted, and most people make it up as they go. So
yeah, but you're seeing some of those behaviors at, like, institutional levels, though.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, we're talking, like, if something happens out here in your neighborhood or at an ice rink, so the institution of sports, you're talking about it. So I mentioned that I went to school to be a teacher. That didn't end up happening. But when I was in grad school, I would substitute teach on days that I didn't have class, because you're almost getting paid to do homework at that point. So again,
right.
As a grad student, you're trying to find ways to make money. So one was reffing, one was substitute teaching. But you would start seeing that same thing in schools as well, whether it's students to teachers, but also parents to teachers as well. A student would do something wrong, a teacher would call a parent, and now it's automatically assumed that the teacher did something wrong to the student to provoke the student to do what the student did. Yeah. And it's this argument, like, again, it's I don't know. Like I said, it's like almost in some of these, very big institutions in our society that these things are taking place in. I don't know what that says for the future. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, it's very concerning. But where do you think it came from? Like, where do you think, if you had to pinpoint a moment in time in which you really recognized it and said, like, this was probably the moment when this happened, that shift changed, when do you think that was, and what do you think that was? Like, what was the catalyst?
Oh, boy.
If you had a guess.
Top of mind?
And you can be honest, because I think I'm
going to be honest.
I think you're honest. I think you're a little older. I think you're a little older than me, so I don't know if you fall into the millennial category.
Yeah,
I assume
I'm 37. I was born in 87, so I'm.
Ooh. Isn't that just like the cusp? Isn't it?
Well, millennials go back all the way to 82.
They do. Okay.
But yeah, we're like the early millennials. So like the pre-technology, like technology was just a thing. Cell phones started becoming a thing when I was in high school, right? So we're kind of like that mid. Yeah. The Nokia brick that you could throw your cell phone.
And you're like, give me my phone.
I bet you if you found one of those Nokia 59, whatever they were called, 5910s or whatever they were called, I bet you it would still pop on right now and be totally fine with it.
Amazing.
This might be controversial.
Okay, go for it.
I think it stems from a lack of discipline.
100%. I agree.
In institutions. It doesn't, I'm not just talking about disciplines in households. I mean, that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not just talking about that. Just the way that things are now. Like, again, schools are run totally differently than when I grew up. Even, I'm not going to lie to you, like I've had conversations with coaches, not only just what I do on the sports psychology side, but even like on the officiating side, when you get to really know people and you go out and you have a drink with them or something like that, and you get to know, like, you hear stories about, I can't say this to kids because I'll have a line of parents or my phone will be blowing up if I even say or do or blah, blah. And it's like, when you hear what those things are, it's not like they're going way above and beyond, like, oh my God, yeah, as a sports psychologist, I'm sitting here like, oh my God, don't do that. No, I'm sitting there like, well, you should probably still be able to do that.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, I think there's a lot of fear when it comes to any type of discipline now, again, in any of those echelons or institutions, I should say, that I think that's where it starts. And I think people just get this notion of, yeah, I can say or do whatever I want, until you learn, no,
you can't. Yeah. Well, so so remember the Titans, right? The movie. I know that because you guys did show up a section of that in class. And believe it or not, there are people out in this world who've never seen that movie. Which, shame on you. Yeah. Shame on you.
What are you doing with your life?
Exactly. What are you doing with your life? So, which I forgot the kid's name that was next to me. He's never seen that movie, and I was like, I don't know what to say. I don't know if to like you or to not like you anymore. But this is the movie you should see. But anyway, so when he, obviously the part that they showed in the class where they, he officially takes over as coach, and he has them just run and do whatever, right?
Yep.
You couldn't do that today. Like, you couldn't do that. Like, you would get after that run. Those kids would call their parents. You wouldn't believe what the coach made us do today. You wouldn't believe, right? Or when they're standing and they're basically practicing, and you got the headlights as lights. Oh my gosh, parents would say, "You have my kid out there in the and you're just like, hey, like, this is toughness. Like, they're playing football. They're gonna get hurt playing football, and you're worried about my words to your kids that's going to ultimately help them."
I've got an example of that for you. This was pre-COVID, I think. So you're talking 4 or 5 years ago. So it's been a little while. But I did a college game. I'll try not to say the universities. I'm bad at that. I did a college game, and the team that won 8-1. Okay. Blew them out.
Yeah.
However, because they were winning by a comfortable margin in the third period, they became very lackadaisical, right? And the coach was not happy with that, right? Because he's trying to implement a culture that, I don't care, we're going to play as hard as we can until the last whistle.
Yeah.
Okay. So the team that won, I go in the locker room after the game, we get changed, we go out the back door. When we go out the back door, the entire team, the winning team that won 8-1, is in full equipment, everything except their skates. They put their tennis shoes on. And they are running in the parking lot. They're doing bear crawls in the park, because he's saying, basically, if you're not going to play in that third period, then we're going to take all that energy you got left and we're going to make you expend it out here.
Yeah.
So next time you have a choice. Do you want to do this, or do you want to play like you should in the third period?
That's freaking awesome.
That coach no longer coaches there.
No. Oh, okay.
And I can't say that it's because of, but you also probably can't say that it's not in part because somebody found out about that. Right. And so, because he was no longer the coach the next season. So, like, we're not even talking like, 3 years went by and no. The next season, he was no longer the coach. They won the league 3 years in a row.
With him as
the coach. And then the next year he was not the coach. So I can't say one way or the other. I don't have that type of inside information. But, like, that's an example of what we're talking about, where, like, 25 years ago, that's like commonplace.
Yeah.
And now it's like you're trying to build a culture. And that, because I do know the coach, and we've had a conversation since then. And that's what he told me. He's like, I'm trying to build a culture, and they seemingly didn't want that type of culture. And so it is what it is.
So sports have become this thing where we're trying to find the next guy, next gal who's going to be the face of them, right? Like, whether it's in college level or professionally, right? And, the kids, like, okay, so like when LeBron James was in middle school, high school, especially in particular in high school, right?
Where's LeBron from again?
Okay. All right.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. I'll be honest with you guys. First and foremost, Michael Jordan's better. He will always be the GOAT. LeBron James is a carbon copy. And also, LeBron James is not even number 2. Okay. I'm just going to be honest, guys. Kobe Bryant is better. and always will be. So I'm just going to put that out there. Also,
We used to be friends.
Number 3, because I'm a realist, guys. I am a realist when I say this. Number 3 is Dwayne Wade. So that being said, then you have LeBron James, right? And by the way, I would just say this: Dwayne Wade went to college. Michael Jordan went to college. Kobe Bryant didn't go to college, but still, he was great. LeBron James, he's all right.
I did just see a stat the other night. I'm not gonna we're not gonna argue about this, but like this is a pretty incredible thing. I'm gonna butcher the number so somebody can fact check me, but I'll get pretty close. So I think it was last night or the night before. He scored 20 points and a half, and at the bottom, so they put up his stat line. And at the very bottom, it said that it's like his 320 point half. That's pretty incredible when you think about it, because they only play 82 games a season.
Yeah.
So I'm bad at math, but that's almost 4 years.
Yeah.
Where you had a game, 4 straight years where you had a game with 20 points and a half.
I will say this: LeBron James,
there are some incredible
freak of an athlete.
Yeah.
He like, I'm just gonna be real. I just turned 30 on the 12th. I could not imagine waking up and being like, can't wait to get out there and just play with them kids. No,
he's playing with his son.
And that's the thing. Like, hell no. I'd be tired. I think he's almost 40. He's 30.
Yeah, because I'm 37. Because he went to Akron, St. Vincent, St. Mary, which is 20 or 30 miles away from where I'm from.
Oh, no.
So I didn't play high school basketball, but my best friend did, and I do know that they played each other. And I think it was when we were freshmen, and he was a senior. So yeah, he's about 40, 41. Because I'm 37.
Oh, so he's like, and that's the thing. Like, no, I don't like to run up and down the court. That's tiring. And then like, he's not, and it, like, guys, and if y'all watch, y'all know he is outpacing all of those people. Like,
bro, he's 6'8", 260.
That's what I'm saying. That dude could be a linebacker, okay? And he's just like, you want me to run down there? Got it. 3 steps. Here we go. Like, and he's just going, and he goes up and down, and like, you'll see his shoe pops off, and he'll be like, give me the ball. It's like, it's just crazy. Anyway, not getting too deep into it. We were talking about something important, I promise, before that. But it was, I just think that, as you mentioned, like the discipline with the kids, the generation nowadays, what I think the catalyst of all this was technology and like the cell phone, like the creation of cell phone and then social media. Like, I know, guys, I'm only 30, but MySpace, okay?
He's going to keep rubbing that in because I'm 37.
Yes, now he said his age. I got him to admit his age without me having to ask how old he was. So that was a win for me. I wanted to do that. But so like MySpace, I know you remember MySpace because you were there for inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there was like MySpace back in the MySpace days, like, you know, like it was fun. It was interesting, like, you know, whatever it was. And you would, you know, we post dumb things and you had your top 3 friends. Like you were just like, hey, if you're on the top 3, you're legit, you know? And I remember that, and it was fun, right? But I also knew it was like, at one point this has to like come to an end, right? Like this can't be forever. Like we can't just like as a society have this be our entire life. And then sure enough, fast forward. Oh yeah, like fast forward, and there's like, it's our entire life now, right? Like we may not rack and stack our friends or have our music on our accounts, but like, you know, yep. we are a lot of people fixated to what social media, the lifestyle of social media, everything on social media. And I think it has created a false reality for a lot of people, especially the younger kids. Like, so like my age millennials of where we were when we were growing up, technology was developing, we were growing. And so like getting a cell phone and then you actually had, you know, apps on the phone, and then you had, so you had all these things. And as we were growing, these things were developing and getting bigger and bigger, and whatever the case might be, to the point where it, like, we grew up together, if you will, right? And so now we are so infatuated with it because we've been there almost the entire time of it. And now these kids are like, they're in love with it as well, because they're like, oh, my parents on it, they see it, and they love this, so now I'm loving it. And then, you know, like people get people are getting rich and because of they're Insta famous or TikTok famous or YouTube famous, whatever the case might be. And so people are like, oh man, there's money into this. And so it's so much into our culture now, but we haven't found a way to like, hey, how do we cut it off? Like, how do we say like, hey, it's too much and we need to get back to reality, and like people need to come back to this space where they're like, oh, like, hey, I'm talking to another human being. This is not through a screen where I can say whatever the hell I want as if there's no consequences. Because I think that's what a lot of it is people will comment something. Like you'll see some egregious comments on some random video and you'd be like, why? Like, I like, you don't even know this person. You hate this dude? Like, why? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And you've never met that person. And like, they're like, I hate you. I hope your whole family is just like, doesn't wake up. Like, just some of the crazy comments. And
people are ruthless.
Yeah. And I'm like, like you would never say that to someone. I would never say that to someone's face. Like maybe to my best friend if we were joking around with each other. But even then it would be hard because I know his family. So like, right. I would never, like, I don't think I could ever say that. Right. God forbid something actually happened. But like, like these kids nowadays, they're like, no, hell no, there's no consequences to what I said. I'll say whatever I want. And I think it is, for me, at least my opinion, is where a lot of that stems from is just the lack of, okay, hey, a balance. There's not a balance of like, hey, technology, it can be a good thing. You have a computer in your phone, in your pocket. Right. It's great, right? At the same time, come back to reality, right? Right. Face-to-face interactions. Like, what does that look like, especially for young kids and brain development, right? Like, I remember kids would be outside till the streetlights, right?
That was all we did.
Bro,
we weren't allowed inside.
Okay, so my parents are old. So like I was adopted, but my parents are old. Like my mom was born in the 50s, y'all. So like old, right? So let me tell you, and you know this. You stepped inside that door.
Yes.
It was like they knew. It was like a sixth sense.
Yes.
What are you doing inside?
Yes.
Can I just get some water? There's a hose outside.
100%.
And then you're like, the hose that just sits there?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, enjoy it. And you're just like, okay, I guess.
And you tasted the plastic of it.
Yeah.
But you know what it tastes like.
Yeah.
Even now, 20 years later, I guarantee as soon as you start talking about that hose, it's been 30 years for me because I'm older. But no, do you still remember? And you'd always forget to let the hose run. So it's been sitting out in the hot sun. So the first little bit, you burn your tongue.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, we were the same way. We would go inside. Again, I have two younger brothers. We were 3 boys. My dad would be mowing the grass. And you'd go inside to go to the bathroom. And 30 seconds later, you hear the mower turn off. And there's your dad. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Go to the bathroom. You're a boy. You can go to the bathroom outside. Good God, man. Like, what do we do? But no, like literally, you were not allowed inside.
For me, so like every Saturday that's where you clean.
Yep.
Like that was the chore day, right?
Yep.
It was like, hey, the sooner you get done with chores, you can watch one show, right? Even though all the shows come out on Saturday, the new episodes, you can watch one show and then you got your butt outside, right? Like it got to a point my mom would be like, you can't have breakfast until you're done with your chores.
Yep.
Like you can't eat. And I was like, oh, I'm hungry, trying to throw a fit. She's like, I don't care. I will call your dad. Well, you know what? These chores all of a sudden look really interesting.
Yep.
Please don't call him.
Please don't call Dad.
Please don't call him.
If I had $1 for every time we told my mom that, I wouldn't have to work for the Army.
Yeah. You know what's crazy? All right, guys, my mom's a great person. I love her to death. And if she sees this, she knows I love her to death. My mom like really hit me one time. Right. And I was older, and it was like, bro, I was like, Ma, I have no idea. And she was like, you need to come down here and find it. So I'm like, all right, helping her find it. And she was sitting on it. So, and so like, it was one of these moments where I just kind of go like this. I go, Ma, you were sitting on the remote. And she was like, I don't know where this thing is. Like, I can't always find it. And I go, I got you, Ma, but like, like you could have looked a little harder, right? Should never have said that, right? Boom, in the face. And I just kind of looked at her and I was like, for the first time, I realized I was bigger than my mom, right? Yep. That's the first time I realized I was bigger than my mom.
Yep. And
I was like, yeah, all right. So she's like, go to your room. I was like, that's where I'm going. Now, in my head, I was like, I handled that smoothly. Oh, I won this. My dad is going to hear about this and he is going to be like, well, Susie, you're wrong for that. And I'm thinking I won. Like, I met him like, I won this one. Yeah,
First mistake. First mistake, telling your mom she sat on it. Second mistake.
right. Wholeheartedly, right? My dad comes home. Keep in mind, I am this petty. I have been waiting for this moment because my dad flies. So he was gone usually for like 2 or 3 days at a time. So he came home, and I remember just sitting there. I was like, you know what? Let him get some space, let him some time. I was like, but I know this conversation is coming. I know it is. And I have prepped in my head like what this is going to be like, where he's just going to tell me, he goes, you know, you were right. You know, she shouldn't have done that. Right? Absolutely not. No, it was within 20 minutes of him being home. Hey, Quan, come on downstairs. And I'm like super excited. I sit down, but I'm calm, collective, right? I don't want to show my excitement. My mom's sitting there, and it's like that look on her face. I was just like, you already know where this conversation is going. I never understood that. My dad scolded me for 30 minutes about the TV remote, how it was my responsibility, mine and my brother's responsibility to make sure the TV remote was accessible, even though my mom was the one watching TV and I was not allowed to watch TV because I was grounded. But it was my fault because she couldn't find the TV remote. And I never forget just sitting there just thinking to myself, like, well, I don't know how I lost this one, but I did. And I went upstairs, and he goes, you're not in trouble anymore. But he goes, just let you know that's not going to happen again. I went to my room and I sat there and I kind of paced, and I was like, what the heck just happened?
Yep.
I didn't understand it. Now I'm married, and I have 2 kids, 2 daughters of my own, a son on the way. And I can tell you right now, I watch these moments where I'm like, she's wrong, but go to your room, grounded. So
yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to look back on childhood. So I don't have kids. I did date somebody for 3 years that had kids. So for a brief time I did. I treated those 2 little boys like they were my own when we were together. But not a full-fledged parent, right? But
my kid, hesitation says no. It's all right, guys. Anyway, I'm joking.
Bro, I'm 37.
You can still have kids?
37. Yeah, no, I know. But so I've got this thing in my head. I'm 37. So even if this happened this year, because I just turned 37, so it technically could happen this year. If it was in the cards, it could happen.
It could.
37, 18, probably be 55 sitting at my kid's graduation.
You'll be all right. You're not going to be the only one.
I know, but still.
The average age right now we're for first-time parents is like 35, 36.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's way later because, people got other stuff. They got trying to get established in their careers and stuff like that. Yeah, no. But I look back, there was times, I'm not going to lie, I love my dad, love my mom. I'm going to say that. I'm going to preface, but I'm going to say with that, so if they ever watch this. And I think my dad would also agree. If my dad was sitting here, he'd agree with the following statement. There were times growing up where I think all 3 of us thought my father was a psychopath. Like just some of the things that he would do. And like, even like the example, like we're going to the bathroom and it's like, well, what are you doing? Get outside. And it's like, what? Right. But he had his own way of doing things.
Yeah.
And like when like you brought up like, Saturdays or cleaning days and chore days. Well, like you would get, hey, go do this. Hey, go pick up the dog poop. Hey, go do that. But he wanted even that done in a certain way. So instead of using the front of the shovel when you pick up the dog remains, right? Remnants. I shouldn't say remains. That sounds
dog remains. I was like, well,
I didn't want to keep saying dog poop. We'll just keep saying dog poop. You don't use the front of the shovel like a kid would do because that tears up the grass. My father was obsessed with the grass, right? So you use the side of the shovel.
Oh,
right. So that's what I'm saying is like he had his own way of doing stuff and you had to learn what his way was, because even if you had a different way, a more efficient way of what you thought was a better, no. You do it dad's way. And like when you're younger, you're like, man, what a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And like, what a psychopath. Like does it get picked up? Like that's what matters. Right. But it's funny, literally, and also ironic funny. Like the older you get and you look back at that stuff, was he being a psychopath? Or was he also trying to teach you like little lessons in there too? And like, that was one of the things that's kind of like become more apparent to me is, was it really about the dog poop? And was it really about picking up the little chunks of grass? Or is it that when you do something, you do it to the best of your ability every single time because that's how it should be done? So if that leaves the grass better off, then that's what you should do.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't see that when you're 15, because at that point you're just like, oh, dad's just on my ass to be on my ass. And it's like, no, I think there were other lessons in there that I just wasn't picking up on. But now that I'm older, a little bit more mature, you look back and you're like, yeah, there was a lot of stuff. And, even like, now, like, I don't know, I think I'm going through like a midlife crisis in a way, because when you see that the life expectancy for a male in the United States is 76 and I'm 37, like, bro, I'm a year away from being midlife. Like it does hit you a little bit, right? And I'm not saying I'm going to go out and buy an expensive car or anything, but
you should. I encourage it.
Yeah, if I had the money, right? But contractors don't make what you think contractors make. We'll put it that way. But no, I mean, you sit there and you start thinking about stuff, and now, like, when I go home, I only get to go home one time a year, so I only get to see my parents like one time a year, because they still live east side of Cleveland, and like you said, I'm busy. I've got my 9 to 5 with the Army. That's never a 9 to 5 with as we talked about. I work with that Navy group. I'm up at 4 a.m. every two mornings a week. I've got my own business, the mentally tougher stuff, so I travel a lot for that. So I'm taking leave time, my vacation time from the Army is to go and do work.
Yeah.
Right. On the weekends, I'm busy. And it's a shitty excuse, but I only get to make it home about one time a year. But now, those conversations, my youngest brother and I will sit, he has 2 kids of his own, a 2-year-old, who's probably 3 years old now, I think, son named Fortis, and a 1.5-year-old named daughter named Lena. And we'll sit around and we'll bullshit with my parents, and like, we'll share stories of like some of that stuff. Like I just shared about my dad, and my dad gets beat red in the face. I didn't do that. And we're sitting there like, yeah, bro, like, you
believe that, like, the audacity to say, like, I didn't do that. I was there. I remember.
Yeah. But it's so funny though, like, to see him get red, and like almost like the childish smile that he gets of like, no, it wasn't me. It wasn't. I'm like, wait a minute. We're talking about the same guy. But yeah, when you actually think back and you start to extract some of those lessons, it's like, oh shit. Like, what if I would have paid attention to, or I should say, what if maybe he was a little bit better at communicating some of that stuff?
Yeah.
Right. And because I think that's a big part of it. Because we can talk about, we got on this track talking about discipline. I mean, I'm not saying that things got to go back to how they were 50 years ago. I mean, there was times where, again, love my mother, but we got chased with a wooden spoon. Yeah. It was like, I'm not saying we got to go back to that. That's not what I mean by discipline. But I think also when there's discipline, there's also got to be some dialect and some kind of dialogue, some conversation into what's going on. Right.
Yeah. I think kids nowadays, and even younger adults, like, or even older adults, but most people, I should say, want to know the why. 100%. And so, like, if we as adults want to know the why, and we remember as kids, like, I just wish I knew why this thing was, or why I couldn't do it why I had to use why I had to pick up the dog poop this way, even though I wasn't damaging the grass as much as bad as he claimed I was, right? Like, I want to just know why, rather than just do it because I tell you to.
Right.
And if we do that to our kids, it's amazing. It's amazing what the results that you get. Now, what I tell people all the time, because even with soldiers, right? At times, there are a lot of times I don't have the time to give you the why. So I do need you just to blindly follow what I'm saying to do, right? But we have gotten so used to and so comfortable with explaining the why that it's like, no, I'm not going to blindly follow you. I need you to give me the why, or I'm not going to do it. Because if it doesn't make sense to me, why would I do it? And in the Army, we have to be able to follow orders, or blindly follow orders.
Sure.
And in the sense of, I may not know the why right now. I may not know the why 2 weeks from now. But at the end of the day, I was given an order. I was told to do something. I need to go do it. And I'll figure it out later. But for our kids, going back to our kids, more or less, is like, hey, we need to, if we give them the why, it helps. But it's just hard because I really just want to be able to say, like, hey, I need you to go do this. And then they not move and be like, well, why am I going to do that? I don't get it. I'm like, hold on. I'm still your dad.
Right.
Go away and go do what I told you to do, right? Or like, hey, I'm still the commander. Go do what I told you to do. Like, I don't owe you an explanation to every single thing. I don't mind you asking why, but I don't owe you an explanation every single time.
Right.
And so I think it's all about balance. But I feel like in society, we are very good at going from one extreme to the other. We never are really good at be like, all right, can we just meet each other in the middle? It's always okay. Well, hey, I far left, far right, never meet in the middle because you want to do that. Well, I'm going to do this. You know what I'm saying? So it's just one extreme or the other. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't have the answer to fixing that, but I do think it is if we're able to give kids more of a why, and then also still teach that discipline, still teach that respect, I think we'll get a lot of it back into the point where it's reasonable.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some education that needs to go on though too.
Yeah.
In that sense, right? Because I think whether we're talking about the parenting aspect, because I hear like when I go into businesses. I do a lot of work with mentally tougher in first responder populations. So police officers, firefighters, different SWAT teams. So even in those who to me are very similar to military, right? In the way that they do things, they rank. I mean, it's very similar. I think that sometimes it comes down to a lack of education, right? And so one of the things, like if we're talking about this whole, the newer generations want to know why. Well, if you take a look at why that is, right? That's how their brains work.
Yeah.
Right. Again, we talked about the technology like that. Yeah. This generation now, right? Again, millennial, some of us had it, some of us didn't. But like these generations that are like in school or they're graduating or that are your privates and your specialists in the Army right now, for the most part, all they've known is technology. And that's how their brains work. A lot of these kids, they can build you literally a computer from nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Because they know how to put it together. They know how to take it apart. And sometimes it's trial and error. Hey, I put this in, it didn't work. That's how their brains work. I think I saw a stat a little while ago. I don't remember the years, but for the longest time, one of the most popular toys at Christmas time, which is coming up, is Legos.
Yeah.
And think about what Legos is. You follow a manual, or you're supposed to follow a manual, but how many times do you see kids and also sometimes adults, you know what, screw the manual, and I'm just going to try and do it myself. And again, it's trial and error. And I put this here. What if I put this here? Does this wheel spin if I don't? That's how their brains start to work. So like they're constructing and deconstructing things. Well, if we just give somebody an order, and again, there's times where that has to happen 100%. I totally agree with that. I'm not naive to that. But also sometimes when it's more of this abstract thing, hey, go do this. Well, why do you want me to do it that way? They're just, a lot of the times, they're not being a pain in the ass. We all know that one that is, but most of the time they're not. They're just trying to construct and deconstruct in their head. Hey, is there a better way to do this? Is there a more efficient way to do this? And sometimes that butts head, especially with the Army, who it's, hey, why do we do this? Well, that's because it's how it was done when I was a private. That's how it's done when my daddy was a private. It's always been done that way. So that's why we continue to do it. Well, sometimes then we wonder why we lack innovation and we lack even just changing different processes to make them more easy to manage and things like that. And then you do get that butting of heads when it's, hey, just do it because I told you. Again, you don't have to tell somebody every time, but when you mix it in there, that's where you start to build the trust of, hey, I get it. Quan probably doesn't have time right now, but he's going to tell me in the next time he has time, or in a week he'll come back and we'll go, hey, remember how I told you to do it this way? This is why I told you to do that. That trust is there. But if there's no trust there, then you start to get that really butting of heads, and there's really not a whole lot of meshing going on. And you see it again. It's not just military. And this happens in businesses that I go into. Again, the first responder community, it's a big thing there. And it is a big problem. And yeah, is there an easy solution? No. But I think there's got to be some give and take on both ends. And I think that's also part of just like society that we live in today. People like to dig their heels in. They make up their mind on something, and I dig my heels in. So if it's, no, you're going to do it because I told you to do it that way, I'm going to dig my heels in. Well, now I'm never going to tell you why. Just because I've got that belief, and that's what I'm going to dig my heels into. Yeah. And now that, again, that doesn't help the situation.
It's the hill I'm choosing to die on, which happens to be every single hill.
Right.
You're just like, okay, all right, man. So I got you. No, it makes sense. And, my experience is soldiers, right? So like I really can only speak to, leading soldiers and having soldiers in that sense of what that looks like. But, it's frustrating because I never thought I'd be the person to say this, but I miss the old days. And I like when I was coming up as a soldier, as a young soldier, and my NCOs and my leaders would say that, I'd be like, well, you just refuse to change, right? And so now I'm at the point where I'm like, no, I miss the old days, and where it just made a lot more sense. It made a lot more sense. Where now, we in some processes we're taking something so simple and we're making it longer. And where I was like, we don't have to do this to ourselves, guys. This is agonizing. Let's just do the thing and be done with it.
Right.
And others were actually making it faster. We're expediting the process. But there are unfortunately people in certain positions that, again, it's the using the corner of the shovel to pick the dog poop versus using the actual flat head of the shovel, where you can get a wider range of stuff. And it's just like, hey, it may make sense, and I know you're right, but I'm going to dig my heels in, and I'm refused to move a muscle. And the end of the day, you have to listen to me because I outrank you. And so it's very frustrating, very, very frustrating, the Army aspect to that. I wanted to ask, kind of get into, you have your own business. You've mentioned it several times here now. You have your own business, and where you're helping, especially military folks, but also first responders and all that. So, like, what led you to starting a business and getting involved? That was it? Is like, hey, I have this knowledge and I want to share it with people, or was it to kind of derived? It was like, hey, this I want to create something. Could be a mixture.
Yeah, a mixture of both. So the biggest driving force, so 2016, I lost my brother, my middle brother, to a heroin overdose. That was November 11th of 2016. So just 8 years ago. Just
So I hear that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And that was kind of the catalyst to starting something. I had a business technically under a different name. I had made a name and made a logo, and like that was like it, right? It really wasn't anything. And I really started to get into it a little bit more, and trying a little bit more after that happened. And really that was kind of like an eye-opening experience for me in many ways, obviously. But it's funny because ironic funny that you had mentioned way earlier when we started talking, loving to do what I do, right? And I'll be honest with you, when I first started working with the Army, those that know Army will get this, and those that won't, I'm going to try and fill in pieces for you. But when I was in grad school for sports psychology, my dream job was to work in professional sports. I didn't care what sport it was. Just wanted to work in professional sports and be a part of the behind the scenes, hopefully, successes that happen on the field, court, ice, whatever it was. And like two weeks into my graduate education, somebody had told me that you could take what we were learning about sports psychology and apply it to a military context, military setting. And that was kind of like one of those light bulb moments that people talk about. Nobody in my immediate family served our country. My dad's dad was drafted, I believe, in Korea. And then my mom's dad was enlisted in the Air Force back in the 60s. But for 30, 40 years, nobody had served. But I grew up, I've been obsessed with airplanes since I was literally 2 years old, because Top Gun came out a year before I was born. Still, best movie.
That's the first one, by the way, guys.
Yeah, that's thank you. So literally when I was 2 years old, I had that movie memorized. My parents were great parents. I'm going to continue to say that. They would sit my butt in front of that movie every day, because it was, at that time, fast, loud things moving across the screen, like that keeps a kid's attention. So I grew up going to air shows. So even though nobody in my immediate family served, you understood the esprit de corps. You understood like the pride that came with that. And when I found out that I could take something I was passionate about, like sports psychology, and I could apply it to them and hopefully make them better, I was like, hell yeah. And so the last, that was 2 weeks into grad school. The remainder of grad school, I did an independent study on the Army's resilience program. Like I wanted the job that I eventually got about 2 months after I graduated from grad school in 15. When I came down to Fort Sam Houston, because I'm a full bird civilian, use that.
Who says that?
Those military people, you can use that too. Full bird civilian. I didn't know what I was getting into. I just knew I knew the population. I wanted to have an impact on them, but I didn't know what I was getting into. So after the interview, and they told me that I got the job and that I was going to Fort Sam Houston, I literally had to look up on the map, where is Fort Sam Houston?
Yeah.
I had no idea. And I'm like, oh, cool, it's San Antonio, because I'm looking at the other installations that we serve, and they're all in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Oh,
no thank
gosh, I'm good.
Fort Johnson, Louisiana, aka Fort Polk. No thank you. Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. It's called Fort Lost in the Woods.
Yes.
Right?
Listen, I would not be resilient out there myself.
But that's what I'm saying. So like when I see I'm going to San Antonio, I'm like, cool, at least I'm in a big city. Like, heck yeah, right? So first day I'm coming to work, and all I know about Army at that point is what I've seen in movies. So I'm thinking when I go through the gates, I'm going to see tanks, and I'm going to hear gunfire, and there's going to be helicopters flying all over and soldiers marching all over the place, right? Those that know about Fort Sam Houston, it's a training installation, right?
Yeah.
TRADOC used to be Medcom, but TRADOC now.
Yeah.
We don't have tanks.
No.
You don't hear gunfire, because if they're ever going to go to the range, it's going to be at Camp Bullis 20 miles down the road. Like there's none of that. It's literally, for those that don't know, it's literally a college campus with a gate around it, right?
Essentially.
And so when I got there, I was kind of like, I'm like, oh, because the way that the job was sold to us, not that it needed selling for me, but they're like, oh, you're going to be a sports psychologist for soldiers instead of athletes. So if they're out doing field training, you're going to be out there with it. And it's like, you're thinking it's going to be this high speed, high op tempo, like boom, boom, boom. Everything's going to be different, right? And at Fort Sam, it's not what it was. And so, like I said, ironic that you brought up like loving what you do. About a year into it, I was over it, man. I didn't love what I was doing.
Yeah.
But when my brother passed, that was one of those take a look in the mirror moments, again, literally and figuratively. And unfortunately, at that point, I had kind of let all of that other like minutia stuff get in the way of me being the best me. So like you got to see me, a couple months ago when we met, at my best. I'm telling stories and yeah, I'm hard on people sometimes because I'm brutally honest, but like I think I'm trying to make people better.
Yeah.
But that's not what people got out of me after that first couple months, because I kind of mailed it in. And when my brother passed, I remember I was sitting at his funeral, and obviously very, very emotional time. First time I ever saw my dad cry.
Yeah.
Because like I said, he's worked construction, so like he's a manly man.
Yeah.
Right? So emotional. But I remember sitting there, and the entire funeral home was packed full of people. There was a line out the door and around the funeral home, to the point at which the funeral home directors came to me because they knew they couldn't go to my parents. They came to me and they said, hey, we need to start like having the whoever's going to say stuff. And because we've got another funeral in a couple hours that we need to get people out of here for and get it all redone. And that was like that, another light bulb moment that was like, I sat there and I thought, if that was me that had passed away, who would have showed up?
Yeah.
Because my brother had a line of people out the door. He had an impact on a lot of people's lives. Yes.
Amazing.
Did he have a drug problem? Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, but he was a good kid.
Yeah.
And so many people showed up that day to celebrate his life. And it got me thinking, if that was me, who would have showed up? And the way I was living, just life in general, but then also, mailing in it at work and not being a great team member to the small team we have and stuff like that, I'd have been lucky to fill the seats that were in that room, much less have a line out the door. And so that was kind of the catalyst of, hey, I need to be better at work when I'm working with the Army, but let me start something so that if anybody comes calling and they want, whether it's business, I don't care who, if they bring me in, I'm going to give them the best that I got every time, because that's my way to hopefully have an impact on them and to make up for the impact I didn't have on people throughout that, 6-8 month period where I was just kind of mailing it in.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest catalyst. And then, yeah, it's just turned into, it sounds corny or cheesy or whatever, and maybe played out at this point, when you hear people talk, but it's the God's honest truth for me is I just want to have an impact on people. And I do things, I think I do things a little bit differently. Like I said, I'm blunt, but I share a lot of stories. I'm an open book. I'll tell you whatever you want to know, even if it doesn't paint me in a good light, because I think those are good learning opportunities for people. And I think that's what what people have gravitated towards is that it is raw and it is honest and it is a little bit different than what people are expecting. But to me, that's how you have an impact. And to me, if I can have an impact on just a couple people, exponentially what that means. Because if I have an impact on Q, and like Q goes home and raises his little girls and his incoming little boy differently, right? That now had an impact on 4 people, not just what, so it's a big thing when you sit back and think about it. So that just became the goal, and we just go about it the way we do, and it's been pretty successful so far. I'm happy with it, but it's a way to carry on my brother's legacy in my head too. So
was it intimidating? Like, because it's one thing to be a prior service member and then get involved with talking to,
sure,
someone in the military or first responders or police officers or law enforcement, or whatever the case might be. But it's a whole other thing to be like, hey, I've seen what you guys do in the movies. I don't really have a glimpse into what your day-to-day life is, but I'm here to learn and I'm here to put my best forward. So was it intimidating, especially like that first class that I imagine you got, like starting at Fort Sam, to be like, how am I going to relate to these people?
Yeah, it was definitely super intimidating. I'm not one that's easily intimidated, I don't think. But yeah, when you're not dressed like everybody else, right? Because that's the military. Everybody's in a uniform.
Yeah.
And when you walk in and you're not in uniform, people look at you.
Yeah.
Right. And they start, they're making judgments about you as soon as you walk in, what you're wearing, how you're walking, are you standing up straight, how you talk, all that stuff. That they're judging you. And I'm not going to lie, at first, I let that get to me, I think. And I think that's why I wasn't the best me that I could be, was because I was trying to put on a face and try to be something that I wasn't. To give you an example or what I mean. When I first started working with the Army, day 1, I was cleanly shaven, right? Baby face, cheek, because I found out that my boss, our manager, named Ed, he, 26 years, retired first sergeant. So 26 years in the Army, retired first sergeant. In talking with him before I moved down here, he told me he was drill sergeant. And again, knowing what I knew from the movies, like you see drill sergeants in movies, like you're, oh God. So I'm showing I cleanly shaven, right? And you try to put on what you think people want you to do, soldiers want you to do or want you to be. But after a couple months of doing that and recognizing that I'm not being me, I don't like what I'm doing, you just go to being your authentic self. And it's kind of like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say a big letter, 4-letter word on here, but in your head, you're just kind of like, fuck it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be me. If they don't like it, then I know that this isn't for me.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to keep trying to put on a face. And because I've never been good at putting on a face. Like I do wear my emotions on my sleeve, right or wrong. There's a lot of people that'll tell you like, yeah, when I'm upset, you're going to know I'm upset. Yeah. Right. But getting to the intimidation part, yeah, I was intimidated. It made me do that. But then understanding, hey, I'm just going to be me. And then that's when I truly started to, take off. And, it's funny. Like I said, I was embedded at the Non-Commissioned Officer Academy, and those guys, there's SLC. They had some SGL, small group leaders.
Yeah.
And those guys, I credit them to the education that I got on working with the Army. They were phenomenal. We would go out to the field, and they would explain things to me. They would put me through different things. Like when we were do like the I call it the inverted rope thing, but where you climb all the way up and you get on top of the rope and you come down.
Yeah.
But you got to get on you don't dangle down, you get on top of it and you kind of split your boys down the middle, right? Like doing that, like understanding, oh, you do it this way because of this. And like they would put me, that's not just, hey, we're going to tell you, we're going to show you. There's a guy, and I'll just use his first name, Hunter. I probably credit him the most because he got raw and the real with me. So not only did they put me through that stuff, but like he was like, hey man, if you have any questions, ask. And he was a flight medic. And so I asked questions and he answered every single one. He put his ego to the side and said, hey man, this is some of the things that I've seen. This is some of the stuff that I did. This is how I struggled when I got back from deployments, all of that. And it gave me such a big picture, not only on like the day to day, but then also like that stuff that a lot of people keep quiet about serving and stuff like that. So all that to say, that was a lot of education. And then that just showed me, number one, be yourself, but it showed me that I need to do my part by learning as much as I can.
Yeah.
I'm a civilian. I'm coming into their world. So I need to learn as much as I can about all of these groups that I work with. So if it's medics, I need to learn as much as I can about being a 68 whiskey.
Yeah.
Will I ever know what it's fully like? Nope. But cool, put me out there, right? There's just a couple of weeks ago, about 2 months ago, a group I've been working with. I'm not going to say who it is, but they were doing a cadaver lab. I've never been around dead bodies before, right? Thank God.
Yeah.
But I was like, hey, I work with a lot of medics. I work with surgeons. I should probably understand what it's like. So I asked, right? Because sometimes you don't get invited to stuff. Sometimes it's on you. You got to ask. Hey, do you mind if I come in and observe your cadaver lab? Sure, no problem. So I show up and we go in there and I'm just like standing off to the side, right? And there's this she was a major surgeon and they're doing some stuff and she goes, hey, your turn. And I go, oh no, ma'am. No. I'm just here observing. And she goes, when are you ever going to get this experience ever again in your life?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, ma'am, you're right. And so I got to get in there and I was doing IOs and IVs and needle decompressions and doing trachs and all of that stuff and I got to feel what it's like to do. I hope I never have to do that in a real life situation, right? But I got to understand, what does that feel like? What does that, and it gives me a deeper understanding and a deeper picture of some of these groups. And I think that I don't know, you'd have to ask them, but from the gist that I get, like that makes them respect me a lot more because I'm not there just to collect the paycheck. I'm there to, hey, I want to learn and I want to talk to you about the real stuff, good, bad, ugly from you. And I want you to hear it from me about stuff I've been through. And it's been really good. And I try to do the same thing with the business that I have. Yeah. I've gone on ride-alongs with police officers, some of them boring, some of them not so boring, right? Yeah. But just to get an understanding of what are these men and women see on a day-to-day basis. In December, I go up, I do some work with a coroner's office. And the last time I was up there, she goes, hey, have you ever seen an autopsy before? And I said, nope. She goes, do you want to? And I said, nope. And again, when are you ever going to get that experience? And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll be there. She goes, make sure you eat bananas in the morning. And I go, bananas? She goes, yeah, because they taste the same way coming back up than they do going down. I'm like, thank you. Appreciate that. Oh, but you get, I've had a lot of really cool experiences, some that I can talk about, some that I can't. But yeah. You start to get invited to things when you show that you give a shit. And I think that's a big piece that I would give a big piece of advice I would give to any civilian working with, whether it's military or first responders or just some group that's not your own. Mm-hmm. Learn as much as you can. And it's not to mimic and it's not to pretend that you know stuff. It's, hey, I just want to understand what it's like to be you on a day-to-day basis as much as possible.
What I found and what I think, and the military folks can attest to this and the law enforcement folks can attest to this as well, is we don't care about whether or not you do what we do, right? But because there are some of us who don't want to do what we're doing. So we wouldn't shit out on our worst enemy, but we're doing it. We're in it, and we have a passion, we care, and we're going to do our job because that's what we're called to do. But most of it is like you said, we just want that real individual. We don't want the individual showing up and pretending to know what we do.
Yep.
And then trying to explain to me what my job is when it's like, cool, you read some book that told you what my job was. That's great. Proud of you. So did all these people here. And guess what we found out? That book is a good foundation. Yep. But the rest of the stuff in there, chapter 7 or chapter 2 through 9 is worthless, right? And that is not applicable to real world. And what we have to do in real world is totally different than how your book explains to navigate these different scenarios and different things in our lives. And so it's rewarding to see when someone shows up and, they're like, like you mentioned the shaving thing, right? When we see you with the beard and the hair you're allowed to have, right? You're allowed to have your beard, you're allowed to have your hair, you do what you're doing, and you're feeling close. Yeah, it's a little, we see it in my little image, like, what's this guy going to know about us? But then when it's the genuine, like, hey, like, oh, he's talking my talk, where it's like, hey, I want I want the genuine side of you. I want the realness. I'm not here to feed you some like feel good. I can connect with you. No. The realness, that's what we like. That's what I say we, because I'm in it, but like, that's what we respect. And that's one of the things when you were teaching, what stood out to me was like, cool. He's genuine. He's this, it was like, I guarantee you the same person who he is here is the same person when he's out there repping hockey, when he's out there doing what he's doing. And that's what I like. And that's what most military people like, is like, okay, it's real. It's not the, let me feed you this hoopla of hunt the good stuff and have no real world applicable way to put it to, but we're going to feed it to you. It's my job, right? It's the, hey, I may not know what you do, but I'm curious if you want to, if I could just stand in the back of your formation as you were friggin' smoking the dog mess out of these soldiers, and you tell me to get down, sure, I'll do it too. Like, I figured, like, I may not be able to do as many push-ups then, but like, I'll do it. And then like, oh, this is what that's like. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Glad I never did it. Like, no. Also cool experience to have, because like you said, it's like, you never know. Like, it's one of those things where, and I like what you said was, if you ask when you ask, most of the time they're like, oh, you want to? Yep. Hell yeah, we want to show you. Like, yep. This is cool. This is a cool part of what we do. Yeah, we want to show you. And then not only to go there just to kind of watch, we're like, all right, hey, got your gloves on? Cool. All right, so you see this right here? This is what you're going to do. And like to teach, like it's fun. It kind of adds validity to what we do to make where it makes sense. Where it's like, I'm glad I'm doing it. It makes me proud to be happy to do what I do.
Yeah, it's putting yourself in as many positions as you can to understand.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, so yeah, we've gotten to go, to the field, whether it's here or at Fort Hood and working with a unit of paladins or whatever. Like, there's all kinds of opportunities like that. But then there's also, like you said, ask, because sometimes you're not just going to be invited.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to take the initiative. But again, that also means something to people when you take that initiative. And so I've tried to take as many TDY missions as I can. That way, I've been to a lot of the installations here in the United States, but I've been to Korea twice. I've been to Germany twice. Just again, and I took those just so that I could understand. Again, I know for you guys, Korea is not a deployment necessarily, but for a civilian to understand what it's like to be in a place for 4 or 5 or 6 weeks where you're 14 or 15 hours ahead of everybody back home.
Yeah.
And understand, even in today's world of technology, how it's hard when you're getting up at 6 a.m. and it's 9 p.m. back here the previous day or whatever. Like, it's hard to communicate still, and like just to understand what being away from people's like. Again, I'll never fully understand what it's like to be deployed for 6, 9, 12 months to a combat zone, or like I won't understand that, but it at least gives me some type of picture so that when people start talking about it, it's like, hey, I have a small idea of what you're talking about, versus being totally lost of like, yep, can't even relate at all. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just putting yourself in those positions. Like, to me, the best compliment that I could get, I think, is when a soldier asks me how long I served, because I didn't.
Yeah.
And it's the fact that they think I did because I can speak the language, because I can have a little bit of knowledge into what they do, or I can use examples in their language of a medic or of like these Navy guys that I'm working with. It's a new group. I've never worked with Navy before.
Yeah.
But learning literally starting from scratch. I got to learn what the rank structure is. I don't know when they say HM1, I'm like, HM1, what is that? And then they got different, because they're the medical installation, like HM1 is not, it's like a P02 or something. I'm like, I don't know. It's confusing.
Yeah.
But you're starting off from square one. But you show, like I said, I'm showing up at 4 a.m. You show up and people start to respect, hey, he doesn't have to get out of bed at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
He's getting his butt here. And when they have, I'm like, hey, whenever you guys have meetings, call me down. We just put one of them through the MRT course because they wanted to see what we were all about. So now we're putting our heads together, trying to figure out how we can help them. It's putting yourself in those positions, taking initiative and asking. And sometimes it's just showing up and just hoping somebody doesn't say, hey, get the fuck out of here. Like, honestly, like sometimes you just got to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I think the biggest compliment is being asked how long you served, even though I didn't, because that means I'm at least on the right track in somebody's eyes. So.
I'll be honest. So if you and Ed stood next to each other and I talked to you both, I would be like, Ed, you've been a civilian your entire life. You've been doing the civilian thing for a very long time. Like, this is you. Him, on the other hand, what you did, like, what, 10 years, got out, said, and then you found your way back to MRT.
Yeah.
What was it, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no offense, Ed. I imagine Ed is a very scary person, in his own regards. I saw a glimpse of it when we were taking the test. Like, I'm not, okay, so, we had to take this test for MRT, and I'm not gonna lie, I thought a normal Army test, like, I'm like, yeah, it's important, but, like, okay, right? Nah, they moved the tables. There was zero talking. He was very adamant. I was like, like, I joined the Army so I didn't have to take the SAT. So, like, but I feel like I'm taking the SAT right now, and it was very intimidating. Where I was like, he's like, these are the rules, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna pass this test.
Yep.
But anyway, but, like, it was when you, like, again, when I first, I'd come in and observe in the classroom, seeing who's who, what's what, right? Seeing all the drill sergeants, seeing all who the instructors are. I was like, okay, got it. And then when obviously I was waiting for you to actually your turn to actually start speaking, right? Because I've heard from the rest of them, and I'm like, all right, cool. When you started talking, going, and I was like, okay, how long was this guy in for? Like, I need to know, like, because I was like, he doesn't look that far off from my age. So I was like, how long was this guy in for? Like, what's going? Did he just, like, retire like 2 years ago? And he's just like, because it was like, what you would cuss, and then you'd be like, I'm sorry. I know I should say that. Is that, you know what I'm saying? And it's funny because it was like, oh, okay, yeah. Us military folks, we cuss like sailors, no pun intended, but, like, like, it's natural for us. So when, again, it's just when you hear someone or see someone in their natural state and it's similar to you, you're just like, I like it.
Yeah, I think that's what's led, I think, to the longevity of doing what I've done for so long is I feel at home, even though like I said, I didn't serve. And when I go into the first responder populations and was never a police officer, never worn a uniform, right? But I feel at home because they speak how I speak, and it's authentic from me, right? I'm not playing a role or anything. I'm not swearing just to swear. Like, that's being the son of Scott and Ellen Sherman, right? We were allowed to, when you grow up in a house of 3 boys, like, you said what you wanted to say, and sometimes it was in colorful language, but that was never really, we weren't punished for that. That's how it was. And then you grow up, playing hockey, like I said, and there's a lot of shit talking that goes on during hockey, right? And even caddying, like I said, you're just out bullshitting with very wealthy people, and you're telling stories and dirty jokes and stuff, and that's how it was. And it's funny that you brought up Ed. Ed, again, is my boss, and when I first started working with the Army, that was my first. I mean, it's an office job, even though we have an office, but we're in classrooms or out in the field or whatever. But I had never worked in an environment like that, and I was intimidated even going in there, because I'm like, wait, I know I can't come in here and be me, right? I can't use the language that I use and stuff like that. So I think that played into some of the face I was putting on in front of soldiers. But Ed's become somewhat of a father figure, right? He's been my manager for all 9.5 years.
Yeah.
And if he sees this, he's gonna hate that I say this. But we butted heads a lot, and, like, those first 2 years, because he's a very strong personality, I'm a very strong personality. And I think we saw a lot of each other in each other, or a lot of ourselves in each other. And yeah, the first 2 years were rough. And then that was when I went to Korea, and he came with me, and I joked that he was like the warden and had to accompany me going overseas to make sure I behaved myself and did stuff that I was supposed to do. But it's funny, when you spend 14 hours on a plane sitting next to somebody, you start to have conversations, and real conversations, not just work conversations, but, you start to understand how he grew up and how I grew up, and the similarities and the differences. And I think after that trip, like I said, 2.5, 3 years into my career, him and it became more of that, father figure. And yeah, there's still times where I joke and I go into his office and I say, hey, is your manager hat on, or are we cool? Right. Cause I gotta, play the right role. But he's been very good at, allowing me to be me, whether that's in the office, whether it's talking to him about serious stuff, or even just doing trainings. Cause there's a lot of people that would say, hey, it's unprofessional to use any type of foul language. I understand where that comes from, but also so you're telling me that I have to put a face on again, and you're telling me I got to put a mask on again, and then I can't be myself. So I kind of just do it and ask forgiveness and not permission sometimes. Like 2 days ago, I was given a brief to command and staff, and that's probably when you want to keep the swear words in your pocket, right? But throughout the course of the conversation, I was telling a story, and I said shit like 2 or 3 times, and the commander came up to me afterwards and was like, "That was fucking great," and I'm like,
"Hey,
sir. Yes, sir, right?" But again, it goes back to like, hey, you're relatable, and I think, yes, there's always going to be 1 or 2 people in any room that I go into, whether it's military, first responder, at a hospital, in a business, that, hey, it's unprofessional. Got it. Those are onesies and twosies.
Yeah.
I think people just want you to be real.
Yeah.
And I think that's, whether, again, you're talking to military population or anywhere you go, I think that's also lacking, right? Getting back to what we talked about before, is like the social media stuff. People have gotten really good at putting on a face and putting on an act.
Yeah.
And I think it's starting to spin back now a little bit, where people just want people to be real.
Yeah.
And if you're real, you stick out, which is like the most oxymoronic thing that you could ever say. But you separate yourself when you're just being you.
Yeah.
And whatever that means, in whatever context we're talking about, if you can just be you, you start to stick out. And yeah,
it's amazing, because that I feel that the mask, that putting on a mask, like even now, like with the job that I was doing as a platoon sergeant, I felt like a lot of times it was just putting on a mask, where I don't want to be the hard ass, or like, I don't want to be that. Like, that to me is annoying. It's annoying. That's not productive, right? I am the jokester. I am the class clown. I am the guy who's like, hey, I will make everything a joke.
right.
And so you tell me some sad, depressing story, I want to make you laugh and feel better, I'll turn it into a joke. Sorry, but I want to make you laugh. I want to make you feel better, right? But like, I want to have a good time, but I also understand, like, okay, hey, we're in a professional environment. We got to get work done. And so trying to balance that and still manage to be myself, it was hard. Like, I found myself trying to be someone else that I wasn't. Like, I need to be this professional. Like, and it didn't work. It wasn't effective, right? And like I said, I didn't like it. Like, I was stressed out all the time. My wife, she was like, she goes, the person you were when you're doing that job versus now, she's like, you are 10 times less stressed out.
Yeah.
And it's stressful because it was just like trying to be someone you're not. And it's when you're able to acknowledge that and be like, okay, I don't have to be that person anymore. It feels good. It feels freeing to be like, truthfully, I don't care about a lot of things. I'm like, I really don't care about a lot of things. Like, people be like, oh my gosh, this thing's going on. And in my head, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry that's happening. And I'm sorry, like, you're really like stressing out about this clearly, but like, I don't care. And it's not to say I don't care about what you're going through. It's just to say, like, maybe you should care less. You know, like you are really devoting a lot of time to caring about this thing that, like, is it going to kill you? No? Well, then let's figure out what tomorrow looks like. You know, like, I don't know. It's just, that's just me. Like, I don't care. Again, it's not to say I don't care about people in their lives, but like, I just don't care about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be that person, because everyone's like, well, you just don't, you're an a-hole. No, I want to be my genuine self. Like you said, I want to be my genuine self. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I think what you're complaining about is stupid. I think you're just looking for a reason to complain. And while I'm here for that, I'll give you 5 minutes. But after that, I need you to pull your head out of your freaking behind and tell me how we're gonna fix the problem, instead of just live here in the problem. You know? So
yeah.
And that's the type of person I am.
Yeah, I think people in my life would tell you I walk a fine balance between that, and then the other side of it. So I'm a highly empathetic person, that's why I always laugh when people are like, oh, he's an asshole. It's like, you have no idea. Actually, like, yeah, I come across because I'm blunt. Like, if that's what you're judging me on, then sure, you can think that. But like, you'd be shocked that I feel a lot. And so if somebody tells me a story, like, there's been times where people told me a story and I got a tear running down my eye, because I'm like, I'm putting myself in their shoes, right? And so I walk this line because but then there is also a part of me, just because of like what I do, it's also like, yes, and what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Right? Because just sitting here and ruminating or just telling everybody that, hey, this stuff's going, that's not any type of like purposeful action on your part. So it doesn't have to be this big thing, but like, what's one small thing that we can do to start either getting ourselves out of this situation or trying to figure out this problem, or do I got to talk to this person? Like, it's just very small things, but like, so that's why I'm saying it's like, yes, I'm empathetic with you, but there is a comma and the word and. What are we then going to do about it? Right.
Yeah.
And trust me, there's times in my life that I need to take that same advice. It's always easier to give other people advice.
100%. I like being the person giving people advice and not following my own. It works.
100%.
It's effective. Please pay me to do so. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And if you're not going to pay him, you can pay me. Or we can tag team it.
Exactly. You know, look for what. Well, you know, it's been an amazing conversation. I live for these conversations, in-person conversations. For me, they're great because I love to talk. And that's a sort of part of me that like led to doing the whole podcast and why in person is hard. Cause like when I do in person, it's like it's like watching Joe Rogan, but like less value guys. I'm sorry. I'm not the bald white guy. And you know, I've been fighting all my life.
A little light right here. I mean, we're getting close to Joe Rogan.
We're getting close. Listen, I'm getting closer. Okay. Like this, at one point we'll see some things change here. But like, you know, I just love talking. And one of the things I like when I watch Joe, especially kind of going back to Joe Rogan again, but it's like, it's just a genuine conversation he's having. Yeah. And I love that. And that's why I can listen to a whole episode of Joe Rogan and be like, you can ask so many more questions, you know what I mean? Like, and it's so, cause it's just a great conversation. I think a lot of people resonate with that. We're like, wow, conversation is great. But podcast, when I do it in person, I am just like, tell me more. I want to know everything in an hour. If you can't do it in an hour, we're going for 2 and we'll figure it out from there. But it's been a phenomenal conversation. I do appreciate you coming on. I've been willing to come to the show because, again, like I said, I was hesitant to ask because I was like, well, if he says no, I'm like, that's pretty embarrassing. And it's always cool. It's always funny because people are like, what is your podcast about? It's like, it's about dads. And I'm like, I'm not one of those. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Like, it's called Mediocre Dads. The title, it's there forever. But it's amazing the insight that those who aren't fathers, they have, because you have the view of the perspective outside looking in, and where you can say like, hey, well, I've dealt with adolescents or whatever, especially in the profession where you're dealing with younger soldiers and younger Navy personnel or Air Force personnel, right? And you're like, all right, I got this. Like, here, where we go, you know what I'm saying? Like, and you can provide that insight to where as parents, we're in it all the time. So like, it's hard to be pulled out from there and say like, okay, I get your kids being a pain in the butt, but I also notice this is what you're doing, right? And a lot of us don't have that person to say, hey, like, this is what I notice you're doing, and you really get into it, and you're like, oh, you are right. I am, you know what I'm saying? So like, that perspective is useful. It's very, very useful. And, you know, you're still young enough to have kids if you ever aspire to have kids, you know, because like I said, we're not that far off in age.
Did you talk to my mom before the podcast? Because she's been telling me the same thing every time we talk on the phone.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. No, she wants more grandkids, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have more grandkids. You see. I will. Here's what I'll say. You said a contract. You know, I don't know how much contracts make. I imagine you guys are rich all the time.
We're not.
But that being said, you also have to be rich like Nick Cannon to do that.
Oh yeah,
he pays a lot in child support willingly.
I'm not gonna lie to you. And you and all of you that are parents, I don't know how y'all do it. Being serious, like dead serious.
Being parents to kids,
just all of it. All of it. The not only the parenting aspect, but then just the financial aspect of it. And obviously, hopefully, there's still a relationship between spouses.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Or if there's not, because of divorce or whatever, that there's some type of co-parenting, you know, situation. But like there's a lot that goes into it. And like when I sit back and I think about either, like I said, my brother has 2 kids, my best friend has 2 kids, or just thinking back to like when we were younger, I sit there sometimes and I think about like, again, 3 boys. My 2 brothers are 18 months apart. So like for a a couple year period, we were all teenagers. Like, how did my parents afford food to eat? Granted, it would cost way less than it does now. I got it, right?
Yeah.
But to feed 3 teenage boys, all that laundry, whether it's the sports stuff, whether like just the amount of laundry. My brother was one of those kids that would change clothes every time he went to the bathroom, right? Especially when he was younger.
Yeah.
Super weird kid. The stuff that we used to say to our parents, like thinking back now, where
Yeah.
like again, like the whole remote thing that you talked about with
Yeah.
you're like, God, that was so dumb. And even if they didn't beat my ass, they should have beat my ass.
Yeah,
They should have.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no, there's just a lot. And I think as you get older, and I think a lot of people, you and everybody else can probably relate to this a little bit, regardless of what your upbringing was like. I think there's a newfound respect, right? And you don't have to agree with everything your parents did or said or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But like sometimes when you get older and you get that perspective, you're like, oh, okay, that made a little bit more sense. I don't have to agree with it, but I understand where it came from at this point, right? It was interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about boys' relationships with their fathers. And it was interesting the way he went about talking about it. He said when boys are young, you idolize your father. So 3 steps, right?
Yeah.
You idolize your father.
That's what Bet David said?
I think that's exactly who it was. Idolize your father, where like they're your hero. They can do no wrong. They can say no wrong. Like everything, you're just googly eyed looking at them, right? And then the second part of it is you start to demonize your father, right? And I think that's probably more so in like those teenage years, like with the dog poop example that I gave you earlier. It's like, why are we doing this? Why are you being so hard on me for like and I'm the oldest, right? So of course it was super hard on me.
Yeah.
But then the third part of it is you humanize your father or your parents, depending on what you got. And when I heard that, I was like, holy shit, like that totally explains everything. Cause now we're in that humanization part of it. And it's like, yeah, you look back and you're like, yeah, don't agree with it, but I understand it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I see what you were trying to do. Maybe we didn't go about it in the right way. I certainly sometimes didn't react properly, right, too. So I play a role in it.
Yeah.
As the kid. But yeah, you look back and you're like, things start to make a little bit more sense now.
You know, it's amazing because I love Patrick David. He's an amazing podcaster, and you know, I've listened to him say that so many times, and I love the humanizing part, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where I am right now. Where you know, I called my dad today, and I was talking to him for a good hour, and I'm sitting there on the phone, and you know, like I heard for the first time a story about how he was going through a rough patch at work, and they were letting him go, and he was just kind of like, well, thank you. I'm happy. I'm happy to go because the boss was a terrible boss, right? And you know, like I sat there and I've like before it would have been like, oh my gosh, it was what you did. Now I was like, that must have sucked. You know what I mean? Like you totally understand. You're like, yeah, I've worked with people who I'm just like,
yep.
I hate you really bad. Like, you know, like, but like, because you just make my life miserable. But then at the same time, you know, whatever the case would be. So I understand it. And now where I'm at, where I'm like, Pops, I feel that. Thanks for sharing that with me. Cause yeah, like now it makes me like, it really helps as his son to be like, oh, like, so you're not this perfect human being that I always believed you to be. And, you know, everything just seemed to be working for you, you know? I'll summarize with this final story. My daughter, so I have ADHD. I see a lot of her in me. And so I do believe she has ADHD. And, you know, she forgets things. I forget so many things. And, you know, but I have to write things down.
Mm-hmm.
I have multiple calendars, right? And that's why you got a late text message of like, hey, it's glad to see you come over. Cause I was like 15th, I have something today. I was like, oh, he's coming in person. So anyway, so like I would tell her, I was like, hey, you remember this. And she's like, she got real upset. She goes, Dad, I just can't remember. And she's crying. And I'm like, I was like, listen, I was like, we got the same brain. Dad can't remember things all the time too. She goes, no, you remember everything. And it broke me because I was like, I really don't. You know how many times Dad has failed because I've forgotten. like simple examples of like, I can't explain to her because she's only 6. So it's like, I've forgotten so many things that your mom has told me to do, or whatever the case might be,
Yep.
that she's gotten mad at me, or whatever the case might be, or what. And like, it broke me because I'm like, she's like, you remember everything. And I'm like, I wish I did. I wish I could live up to how you saw me, like this amazing dad that gets everything. I wish I could do that, but I can't. And I try to explain to her that I don't, and she wholeheartedly believes. She's like, no, you remember everything. She tells me all the time. She goes, you remember everything. You don't forget. You don't know what it's like. And it hurts because I'm like, no, you know how many times I've written this thing down of like, I have to go to this appointment at this time, or I have, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
It's crazy. But anyway, kids are great. Have them.
Yeah, but if you think, though, like, just last thing.
You're good
on that, because I know you want to wrap up.
No, you're good.
Last thing on that. I think that is a big thing for parents, but then also, again, you can apply it to a work setting as well. To take away from this part of the conversation is the humanization part.
Yeah.
And I think if we can start getting to that point a little bit earlier, in whether it's our kids' lives or the people that we lead's life or the people that we work with, if you're not in a leadership position, whatever, to where people are more willing to be human in front of people and admit, hey, yeah, when I first started doing this job, if it's a work setting, when I first started, hey, I put a face. I like all the story I told you earlier, right? Hey, this is how I made this error. Hey, I didn't ask to go do this stuff. Like, putting that stuff out there to help people. And even if it's from a parent to a kid, starting to humanize yourself a little bit more. I don't know what the appropriate age would be. I think 6 years old is a perfect time to start doing that, right? Maybe they don't understand it fully, but just to start those conversations of, hey, baby girl, I'm not perfect. And here's an example of how daddy's not perfect or mommy's not perfect. Again, it might not start resonating with them, but the more we can start having those conversations, now when they become to get teenagers, now it's a dialogue back and forth. And so now if I'm your kid and I make a mistake, now I know it's probably going to be a two-way conversation, not just a you to me about how I screwed up. It's, hey, yeah, let's figure this out, right? I've screwed up somehow in the past too. This is what I did. This is what worked, what didn't work. What do you think the next step should be with you, whatever, and having a conversation and just everybody starting to humanize each other a little bit more. And I think a lot of it starts with doing stuff like this where you get people to sit down and just start talking about stuff, whether it's mom and dad to kid, whether it's coworker to coworker, soldier to soldier, whatever, having real conversations. And again, getting back to, it's not just social media where everybody puts their face, their right face out there. It's, hey, there's some stuff behind, there's some skeletons in people's closets. And hey, maybe we start talking about that stuff again.
Yeah.
And being more real with each other moving forward and see what that does. And maybe we get to a place in society or in parenting or in schools or wherever to where things start to get back to a little bit of normalcy.
Well, we remember that we're all human.
Yeah.
You know, because I think we've forgotten that we're all human. And so it's, it'd be amazing to get back to that time. But like I said, I am a person of the back in the day. Yeah. So, but anyway, hey, again, I appreciate you coming on. It's been an amazing episode. Guys, if you are watching this, thank you. It's again, Mediocre Dads is not a huge channel, but is a growing channel. And I appreciate those who do watch and who do stop by. And if you do stop by, you watch, please subscribe to the channel, of course, because that's very important to me. It means a lot, trying to grow the channel, trying to get it to something where it reaches thousands of people at one point. So that being said, I will finish with this, guys. And I hope you always remember this. Being mediocre is a choice, and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. Whether you're a dad, whether you're a leader, whether you're a person who is just, trying to get better every single day in their life, you have to refuse to be mediocre, because if you allow that mediocrity to take over, you'll stay in that place for a very long time. So that's all I got. Appreciate y'all joining us, and Mediocre Dads out.